Hello, Cephers. Welcome to the Ceph Developer Monthly meeting from March 2018. So we have a list of topics to discuss on this meeting, which is happening on APEC friendly hours. So let's take a look. So for this meeting, we have Yehuda talking about Rails Gateway. Sage will talk about TJ merging and config history. Kefu will provide us an update about changes on C star, and Mina will talk about the updates as well on the clay codes, right? So how do you prefer? Would you like to start, Yehuda?
Sure. All right. So the topic is about to speak a feature that we're thinking about, in which we would log a bucket operations, leveraging the multi-site sync module. So that's basically would allow us to see, or to allow users to have an audit about all the objects that have changed in a specific zone, or potentially a specific packet. In general, the multi-site sync module is a framework that allows us to, by default, sync data between multiple zones. There's a system of callbacks there that are being triggered whenever a change happens, and internally we track the changes and make sure that we don't miss any change, and then the callback is then specific to the different module. So the default module just pulls data in. There's another module that looks at the source object that changed and updates Elasticsearch with information about that. There is a minimal module that takes the information that change, just updates the debug log about the information. Not really useful, just for maybe debugging. In upcoming Mimic, we're gonna have the Cloud Sync module, which is pulling the data from the source zones and pushing it up to S3 compatible storage, either AWS, or you can push it to different RGW or some other cloud system that is compatible. And now we're looking at being able to create some kind of repo or register that information so that external utilities could use that information. For example, a backup system could just be able to look at these logs and pull it into its own system without us needing to implement anything specific for that system. Now, I said one of the suggestions was that what we're going to create out of that logs is, or out of the system is a system that would log it in a way that is compatible with the S3 logging interface, logging API. And we can do that. The only problem there is that the logs format is so that multiple changes are consolidated into a single object. So the way that the Ether login works is you turn it on a specific bucket, and then it records different changes that happen on that specific bucket, and from time to time it pushes that into another bucket inside an RGW object or S3 object. So for this to work, we would need to do some kind of to keep the data in some temporary repository, and then from time to time scrap that, or go over that and create the final S3 objects. I'm not 100% sure that that's what we'd want, as it's not completely like, if users want to see a real time of objects that have changed, then they're not gonna get it from the specific API.
So I'm looking at the I put it in the chat, the S3 page for server access logging, and it looks pretty different from what I thought it was actually. It looks more like a HTTP access log. It has like gets and puts. It has like every operation on the bucket, like whatever it is.
Right.
And our internal log is like only making note of changes. That's right.
We can create something that would be compatible with a format, but it's not gonna record everything. Just gonna record that changes. Right.
Yeah.
Another option is to keep it somewhere else, right? Either, I don't know, Elasticsearch, or or some other third party, and then have some kind of an API to fetch that information, or we can keep it in Redis, similar to the way that we keep usage logging, that it's being indexed by bucket and by user, and then just have an API to fetch it, which shouldn't be too difficult to implement.
Yeah. So the reason why this came up originally was a user wanted a change log just to see changes.
Mm-hmm.
And the thinking was that if we can just use a standard S3 API to do a standard S3 compatible feature, then it would be two birds with one stone.
Right.
Like I'm looking at this, it doesn't look like there's a way to only log changes. It logs everything, gets inputs.
Yeah, no.
At least with the S3 one.
That's what it logs, right?
Yeah.
But we can just log the changes
Yeah.
For this specific use case, right? It can be like the API to fetch the information could look like the same API that you get here. Like you create,
but it'd be a subset of the operation.
Either create an object, or you can create a virtual bucket, right? That would allow you to do something with it.
Virtual object.
I'm not
or
sure.
something.
A virtual object. Yeah, but then you'd have to have a bucket and to be able to list it. It's so complicated.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's the best idea. Right. So, yeah, it seems to me that we can provide some kind of an API that would be, S3 compatible, but not the specific logging API.
Yeah.
Right. That internally would keep it, if you want to keep it internally, would keep it in a usage-like store. Like in usage, we keep it in OMAP, sharded, and with maybe a way to automatically trim the information, because you don't want to blow everything. And the API would allow you to request either information by bucket or by user, and by specifying a time frame of when the changes that you want to see, and some kind of a marker so that you can iterate through it. Pretty much like the usage log. The usage log is recording everything. It squashes everything like in an hour period. So all information it's recorded in it like in one big entry for every hour.
But it's condensed down, right? So it's only the summation.
Right, and here you need to log all the events that are triggered by the sync subsystem.
It kind of seems like instead of using OMAP or something, just like writing it out as just log entries in an actual object. If you can do appends, like you have multiple gateways appending to the same.
You can do something like that, but right, I think you're able to do a streaming writes to an S3 object. That you don't need to specify the object size. I'm not 100% sure, but I think you can.
Mm-hmm.
In which case you can probably do it. Another way would be to just aggregate lots of info, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then flash it from time to time, but you will also need to write it somewhere else, because if the gateway goes down, then you lose that information.
Yeah, I mean, so reading the document, it's like S3 periodically collects access log records, consolidates them to log files, and uploads the log files to your target. It doesn't say often, right, but it says it's like infrequent, and it also says it's best effort log delivery. So it's rare that it misses it, but you're not guaranteed to get logging.
Right. Yeah, it's not going to be the same login mechanism, right? It's going to be just leveraging the same. It's not even the same API, because the API is basically S3 objects, right?
Yeah.
So if we want to create S3 objects that hold information about which objects changed, then we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the question is whether it's okay that we only write like an object in it, like the resolution would be like a minute, an hour or so, and for temporary data, we'd flash it somewhere else. So I think we can do it. Like, right, a change comes, we log it somewhere else in some internal OMAP data structure, and then every minute we take a lock, grab all the changes that happen on that object, create this new S3 object, put in some other bucket, and that's all. Now, put it in some other bucket, it needs to be, it's going to be a bucket in a separate S3 system, right?
Mm-hmm.
A separate endpoint.
It doesn't tell you like how often it actually flushes out these log objects. Maybe probably just play with the S3 one and see how often it does it. It's like once a minute or once an hour or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
okay. Well, so I mean, coming back, is this the right tool to provide an RGW user an interface to find out about changes? I mean, we can do it, right? Do you
Yeah,
think
we
this is
can
the
do
right
it.
way
We
to
can
do
do
it?
lots of things.
Yeah.
It kind of seems forced to me. Forced.
Yeah.
Like if we're keeping everything in a temporary store, it doesn't have to be a temporary store, and we can add some APIs to read it from that, and that that should work. Or
Yeah.
so the question is, like, the one point is when I was saying put it in some S3 object in some bucket, the bucket can reside in at the same source zone. Like we could configure it so that it would go to the source zone and put that data on that bucket, but we need to be careful not to log that specific bucket, right? Because then,
Right, you're logging the writing of the log files.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like that's what S3 does.
It does.
If you like, for example, if you log back to the bucket that you're logging, then you'll see log entries for the log writes.
Right. Yeah, and configuration-wise, we need to make sure, like the configuration would probably be like we could specify which buckets we want to log, particularly part of that zone configuration, the sync module zone configuration.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, so we can do that. Whether that's the right way to log it, I'm not sure. Like,
yeah,
I see these two options, and a third option would be to find external login. What's the name? Kafka or whatever system, and dump it is there. But if you want something that is S3 compatible, then that's probably the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Have you mocked up the cost of this in terms of Rados IOs? Because that's probably something to look at. We don't want. I wasn't quite clear on how you were doing your partitioning, but it sounded kind of like if someone's doing sporadic IO, then they're going to do a Rados IO for their put and a Rados IO to log their put, and then another Rados IO to log their put in the minute or hour scaled buckets. Yeah.
Yep. That's
for operators is going to be really, really expensive.
I mean, I think it depends on what the goal is, right? Sorry. There's the goal of having a change log for the bucket. There's the goal of providing an S3 API that just has like a usage access log. And if it's just to have a log, then it can be like, I mean, you can just buffer it all in memory for like an hour and flush it out. And if you lose some log, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
That's the way that S3 does it. If you want like a reliable log of changes, then you can reuse the bucket index log that we already have, right? Or is that not?
Well, that's pretty much what we're doing here, right?
Yeah.
We're reusing it. We need to take that information out of the bucket index log and put it in some kind of
and then periodically dump it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Now keep in mind that if you create a temporary usage or whatever logging, that from that you're creating a new object, then you're consolidating everything. The temporary one is not necessarily gonna run on the same cluster, on the same Ceph cluster, or not on the same pool.
Yeah.
You could carve out some.
This is if you're structuring it as a sync module, right?
Yeah. That was pretty much what I'm talking about. Everything I was talking about now was a sync module. At the time, we had someone that actually worked on bucket logging API. I don't think it materialized into finalized work though. So.
Okay. Well, I've never actually heard anybody ask for the like Amazon S3 logging API.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard somebody ask for a change log, and that was for the purpose of doing a backup. So their backup system could identify changed objects and slurp just those up instead of iterating over the whole object or bucket and looking for changes.
Right. So it seems to me
separate them.
It seems to me, well, there's identifying the changes, then what to do with that. So identifying changes, you will need to, if you want to aggregate it, you need to put it somewhere. Otherwise, you're going to lose the change, right? So we probably need, in that zone that does the sync module, you need to keep the data somewhere in some index, probably an OMAP, unless you're dumping it outside. So you need to keep it in OMAP there and have some kind of a periodical system that collects it and generates something out of that, like once a minute, once an hour, I don't know. The information that you keep there is just, name of the bucket and name of an object and version of an object, right? Potentially what was the modification time or last modification time of that. Because if it's temporary information, you don't care about multiple writes to the same object.
Yeah.
If it's the same version, right? And that can only happen on a non-versioned object. So in that case, you go over that index once a minute and then do something with it. One of the things that you can do with it is, create an object and throw it to S3 or throw it to the S3 system that you got all that information from in some bucket, which probably is pretty trivial. You don't necessarily need to create the same log structure that Amazon has. You can just create a JSON object like that has an array of, key, like buckets and keys and versions.
Yeah.
And time.
Okay.
And I think that should be sufficient for.
So I wonder what would the next step be? Like just to have summarize the straw man proposal and email it out. I don't know how important this is. It's like one person who asked for it.
Well, I was asked about it a few more times since you were asked about it, but yeah, I'll draft something and I'll send it to Sevdevel, I guess.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, it seemed to me that will be the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. I think just very generally speaking, my worry is just that if we have too many, there's already the index log that we use for the replication. There's also the usage logs that we have. Those are consolidated, I guess, so it's totally different. I mean, I can't remember if there's is there an op log also in RGW that'll log every single operation?
There is. I don't know if anyone's using it. I'd rather throw it away, but we need to ask.
Ask Dreamhouse, probably.
Dreamhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. Sorry.
No worries.
All right.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'll draft something and send it to Sevdevel.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks.
All right.
All right. Next thing up here is merging update. I have updated pad slightly. This should be really brief. There's a big pull request that's getting closer to being stable that refactors a bunch of the peering messages going through fast dispatch and the sharded work queue in the OSD. That's almost ready. But on top of that, there's a shorter pull request that I'm working on that allows you to merge PGs. This is based on the basic design that we talked about a couple months ago in December, a few CDMs back. So the basic design is that the PG map pool property has a new number, and in addition to PGNum and PGPNum, there's also a PGNum pending that is normally equal to PGNum, but it can be one less than PGNum, which basically says that this PG is about to be merged. And it basically tells the OSD to quiesce IO. So once it goes into that stage, it triggers a new peering interval. It peers, it goes clean, and then once it's clean, and it's not allowing any IO during this period, it sends a message to the monitor that says, "I'm ready to merge. I'm clean and I'm quiesced and there's nothing going on." When the monitor receives that message, then it takes the PGNum and it reduces it by 1 down to PGNum pending, and that triggers the actual PG merge. And then in response to that, the OSD will smush the two together. So that all that monitor stuff is implemented. It currently has a restriction that you can only do it by 1 PG at a time. I'm not sure there's any real reason to do more than that. And on the bottom of the stack, the object store merge function is also implemented for mem store, file store, KStore, and blue store. And the in-between bits in the OSD that actually sort of orchestrate the PGs getting merged together and the old one getting removed from the map and all that stuff is sort of minimally implemented. I got it to actually merge a PG, but it doesn't deal with all the weird cases like if the PGs weren't clean when that happens, what does it do, and so on. So so there's still some work to do there. Like for example, the first crash I hit was the PG might have gone totally clean, but there might be a stray replica that was in the process of getting deleted that didn't get deleted yet. And so when the merge happens, what happens to that stray one? Right now it crashes, but it should just like probably do a merge into the new PG ID and mark itself as incomplete or whatever and continue doing the delete, something like that. But yeah, that's not all. That's sort of the next piece. So that's encouraging. As soon as the bigger PG, whatever OSD sharded work queue refactor stuff is done, then I'm going to switch focus to that. The other half of this is something to actually orchestrate this. So right now, and this is where I could use some input. Right now, the monitor command is Ceph OSD set PGNum, whatever the number is, -1. And so you can basically like literally reduce it by 1 each time, and it'll do it. That's not super friendly. So either we need to have something like another property that's like PGNum goal or something, and so it'll automatically sort of ratchet it down until it gets to where it wants to go, or we can restructure this so that you just set the PGNum where you want it to be, and the monitor, like the pending is like, whatever the target is, and then the monitor will automatically sort of like do 1 by 1 at a time as that progression happens. Yeah, I'm not really sure which path to take. Anybody have any opinions? I guess, Greg, do you have any thoughts there?
Sorry, I kind of drifted off. What was
it's too vague? Okay, so the specific issue is that you have PGNum is the actual PGNum, right? That's that, and then PGPNum is the placement. So that has to be well below wherever it is that wherever you want to go.
So is it just whether you want to make the user specify their target or incrementally change it every time?
So the way that it's done right now is that you can set PGNum pending anywhere between PGPNum and PGNum.
Right.
And any of those PGs that are covered in that between pending and PGNum, it triggers a new interval, and they quiesce IO, and they basically get ready to merge. And then they send a message to the monitor saying, "Okay, I'm ready to merge." Right now, it's only smart enough to do it 1 at a time, and so the monitor just says you can only reduce PG pending by 1 at a time, and it'll do it. And I did that because I didn't want to sort of encode the -1, you can only do it 1 at a time, into the PG interval is new interval function, which is going to like affects client behavior on the objector and OSD behavior, and it's going to be hard to change over time. whereas making the monitor smart enough to like do multiples at once would be. So I'm kind of inclined to keep pgnum be the thing that the intervals are based on, which means that we need like another property, which would be like pgnum goal or pgnum target, which would be somewhere else, and then the monitor would automatically reduce pgnum pending by 1 until it reaches, or however smart it ends up being, until it gets to the pgnum goal.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a sort of coordination job.
Yeah.
And I think we have a place for coordination jobs now. It's very exciting.
Yep.
It's called the Ceph manager.
Yeah.
That said, at least in the early draft I looked at, then the OSD was perfectly willing to try and merge a lot more than 1 PG at a time. And if we only do 1 PG at a time, then that's an awful lot of maps for any cluster where you're actually going to run this. And I don't know, like, our map processing has gotten a lot more efficient, but I'm worried about trying to, go from 64K to 32K PGs, what that's going to do to the cluster's throughput as a whole. And its, liveliness by trying to process that many maps as quickly as is happy to do it.
That is a lot of maps, like, once you do the whole thing, but the actual maps are coming slowly, like, it's a couple seconds between the map updates.
I mean, as long as whatever it is that does that, because that's not generally what the monitor does. I don't remember what its interval is, but it's not a couple of seconds in almost any case.
Yeah, I guess it depends. Yeah, you're right. Well, so John is working on something in the manager that will sort of auto-scale the PGs based on whatever, being clever. So it seems like if that's the case, then it doesn't matter whether the monitor stores this target. It'll just sort of, it can do it one by one once it figures it out. The thing that I think I worry about is the administrator isn't using the auto scaling. They're just like, I have this pool with 8,000 PGs and I want it to have 4,000. I want to tell the cluster to do that and then walk away. So
I mean, they don't need to be using the autoscaler for the manager to take responsibility for moving it.
Yeah.
And I think that's
it would be
an appropriate answer.
It would be a different, it means that instead of typing Ceph OSD set pgnum foo, it'd be like Ceph, please scale my PG automatically for me until 4,000 or something. It'd be a different command. Which I guess is fine because it's like a background operation. You're not doing it all at once.
Yeah. And I mean, we can start forwarding some of those commands, specific kinds of commands to the manager too. There's no reason we can't intercept stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the merging update. Anybody have questions about that? I'm reasonably confident we'll be able to get that ready to go for Mimic. But we'll see. We have a month and a half, so fingers crossed. All right. The next thing I was going to talk about was config history. This one I have, I think, more substantial questions because it's pretty open-ended. So here's the pad. There's a pull request with the current work in progress, but it only implements a couple commands. So the first thing that it does is it basically just makes the monitor log every config change. It puts it all in the config key space. So all the config options right now are prefixed with config / and then something. And this adds config-history / and then a version ID of whatever the changes that you made / and then all the stuff that changed. And it's, the keys look like a diff, so it's like a plus if you set something, it's a minus if it unset something. And it's done that way so you can see if it changed, if the config value changed, it stores both the old value and the new value, so you have like you can go in both directions without having the full history. So that's what's there. There's a Ceph config log command that will just dump the log of changes. That's pretty straightforward. It just separates the version number of the config change and then a timestamp when it happened, and then all the stuff that was added or removed. And then the first thing I sort of built on top of that is just a revert command where you give it a version to revert the config to, and it'll roll back all the changes back to that point in time by looking at all the diffs and just reversing them basically. So that's implemented. It works fine, but it's like a super basic limited interface. So I have a whole bunch of questions about how we want this whole thing to work. And ideally, somebody who actually runs Ceph in production who uses a like source control or something to manage their configs or something would be good to have somebody's input. Maybe I'll send an email after this. So the first question I had was the command I did is ceph config revert, and it basically rolls everything back up until a version, which is actually, I realized after I did this, is different than how git revert works, where you give it, if you have a specific change, it'll revert just that one change, not everything between now and that change. So I'm wondering what the right word is for the rolling everything back. I don't know if it's a rollback, I guess maybe since I keep saying that. And is that different than revert?
Reset.
Reset.
Yep.
Yeah, it could be reset. Right. Yeah, that's reset. That's totally reset. You're right. Okay. The nice thing is that it logs that as a change. So like when you revert, it's actually just a new change on top of the change history. So it doesn't actually jump you back in time. It just adds a new change that reverts everything back to whatever it was. But yeah, I think reset makes more sense. Okay. And then for reverting a specific change, I guess revert makes sense. Revert. To previous state. Okay. That makes sense. Then things get really weird. Because I was like, oh, you should be able to, when you roll back, you should be able to roll back configs only for like a certain part of the cluster or a certain config option. And so the revert has an argument for the who, which is like mon.a, OSD. It could be OSD/rec equals who. It could be like all that same stuff. But it turns out that it's once you start thinking about it, it's super unclear what that really means. For example, if you have...
If I can break in here,
yeah,
what's the use case for even wanting to do partial config reverts? Like, I just don't think we should support it.
Yeah, that would be an easier solution.
In particular, I think it's going to be hard to support people who are using it, and I think that it's going to be hard for people who are using it to, like, it encourages people who are using the revert and the rollback to try and identify that a specific portion of their config change caused a macro level problem, and most people aren't going to be able to identify those problems or those causes accurately, or they're going, and even worse, they're going to think that they're like going to pick one as a guess, and behavior is going to change, and so they think they were right, but they're going to think that for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking like the use case would be maybe you apply a config to a whole cluster, and then you want to roll back like just one rack. But I think actually it's the other way around. You probably want to like apply the config to just one rack, make sure it's okay, and then apply it to the whole cluster or something. But yeah, okay, that's easier. So okay, the other half of that is the option argument. That one is pretty well defined. Like I want to revert just the debug MS value to a previous state versus all the other config things that changed during that period. Is that one more reasonable?
I mean, kind of, but you can just set it again. Like I wouldn't bother trying to partition it. I think it should just be a timeline. That's a lot easier to explain to people. It's a lot easier to support. It's a lot easier to change the implementation and mute them on.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Anybody else? Everybody else agree with that? Any other opinions? That's certainly easier to implement for first version. Okay, I'm happy with that. So the last thing, I guess not the last thing, but obviously there'd be a diff in there, so you can like look at the changes between now and the previous time. I haven't implemented that, but that's pretty easy and it would be useful. But the main thing that kind of bothers me right now is actually just the way that these versions are being identified right now is just a version number that always starts at 1. Hold on. All right. Sorry. It's just these version numbers, and the way that reset, I guess, as it would be called, would work. You could just type ceph config reset 1, and it would blow away every config change ever made, and basically go back to an empty configuration, which seems kind of dangerous for like a one-liner command. And when I first started implementing this, I was going to put like, so you can pass a negative number and it would go back like 2 changes, and that also seems dangerous because it's like racy. But I guess what I'm getting at is I was wondering if it would make sense to stick with these version numbers, or if we should make the user like label the config at a particular time by like tagging it. So you do like ceph config tag, Monday, or I don't know, whatever you want to do, and then make all these other commands in terms of the tags instead of the version numbers. Or is that just like complicating it?
Some SHA-1 7 digits. I don't know.
Just so it's a number. Yeah.
Yeah. So that even if you because here if you reset and then create a new one, then you override the old ones, right? You cannot keep history of if you regret your reset, right? You want to go back to a newer version, but you can accidentally just like lose all your configuration by like.
Well, the way that it's implemented, it's always a forward progression history, so it's not quite like Git in that sense. If you reset, it'll just have a new change on top that undoes everything that you did before. So you can undo you can undo the revert or the reset to get back to.
Yeah, but then someone's going to implement reset --hard and and which would not do that. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's the version number it's just using the internal version number that the monitor is using, which can't go back in time. It always goes forward. So we couldn't really do a reset if we wanted to, unless we got really wacky. But I guess the question is it useful to have labels, like user-defined labels of like, this is my working config as of whatever, or something?
It is definitely useful to have it. Don't need to replace the
version number thing.
The version number though.
Okay.
Added to like.
So they could provide a number or a string, because right now it's just a version number and then there's a timestamp. Which I think we don't want to have.
If you're worried about friendly things, then maybe what we can do is let them provide a timestamp and then identify the config at that time, just by, doing comparisons on the ones in the log history.
So they could say, I want to revert to the config on Monday.
Yes, I know it worked on 2018 3:01 at midnight. I don't know about after that. Go back to that one.
Well, you can add lots of things like tag, and also a place to put comment, that you can later read something about it, like if
So the thing that the model that comes to mind is that the underlying history stays the same, like their versions, and each version has a date associated with it. And then on top of that, there's a second layer of maps of names to versions. That's the thing that the user tags basically. So you can say ceph config tag foo, and it'll tag the latest version, or you can say ceph config tag foo, and then you give it a version number and it'll tag some other previous version. And that's sort of a look aside, just mapping of names to the versions, the tags you can delete and so on.
But I mean, so if we do let them tag stuff, I mean, they're not. It's not like they're going to be able to pick out specific config values from a tag. It's just go back to a tag because we changed it.
It's just otherwise they're like, I want to go back to the thing on last week when, or whenever it was that I like had everything working. I want that as a reference. They have to go look through the history and like look at the timestamps and try to figure out when that was. Like, there's no way for them to like annotate. Like, this is when it was good. I think that's kind of what I'm thinking. Having another
so it's
function
more
where
so what it actually is more like we're going to make some changes. Tag the like pre-change state.
Yeah.
Now
Right,
we've
exactly.
made half of our changes and it appears to be working. Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, or like when
after added new OSD, sign tweaking.
I mean, we want to provide the important bits, hopefully, of what people. So what like large operations do is they actually have all this config stored externally in Git or some other source control, and they're doing things like, this is my staging, this is when I roll out in production. Like, they push everything out every Tuesday or whatever it is. I don't know all the processes they have around that, and they're using all those various functionality in the source control to like manage all this stuff and to keep track of it. So I wonder if what we really want to do is talk to like, the folks at OVH or whatever and find out what they're like. Peter was, when we were first talking about mon-based config, was pretty negative because he's happy with their external config management. So it'd be interesting to just see what parts of their external config stuff they really use, and why they use it to really understand, I guess. Of course, he's in Europe, so he's not here.
Well, I mean, we don't necessarily need to replace every config management.
No. Yeah, no, I know. Yeah.
Exactly.
But it'd be nice to have the basics.
Yeah. But I mean, it seems like history pretty much does that, and I guess if we want to do the labels, that's friendly too. But...
Well, okay, so I'll start with just changing revert to reset, and I'll make revert actually just revert one. No, we wouldn't do that. We'll just do reset. And then I'll add diff, and I'll take out the weird who thing and option thing, so it'll just be simple. And that, I think, is like a first pass. And then after that, we can layer on tags and stuff if we want to. But that seems like a good start to me. Okay. All right. Yeah, thanks. That's helpful. That's all I have on config history. Kifu, you there?
Yes. Hello?
Yep, we can hear you. How's it going?
Great, thanks. I put the items on the pad. I'm putting the URL in the chat. Basically, straight I will be talking. So I have two branches. One is whip Ceph alien, and the other is the whip C star. The status call is the simple test case. So we can run we can submit a task to C star from alien thread. By alien thread, I mean the thread not managed by C star, because in C star the thread has access to a thread local storage. For instance, the engine and the attached work item queues. But if the current thread is not managed by C star, we have no access to them. That's why we need to introduce the new API named submit2, which was suggested by Casey. The submit2 is different from the C star submit2 in the sense that it will not post the fulfilled permits back to the local core, because we cannot identify the local core, because the current thread could be scheduled to some random cores, and we cannot identify it using the local storage, i.e. the engine core. And when implementing the test case, I found that we need to take special care of the life cycle of C star, because the C star is not necessarily ready when we submit the work item to it, and we need a protocol between the C star and the alien thread, so the alien thread can be notified when the C star is ready to serve. That's why we need another core named the write many, which is the new API I introduced to C star to facilitate the communication between alien thread and the C star thread. And it's a very thin wrapper around the write C star core, because as you might know, that C star has a very handy API named the write sum, which is able to write to a given FD, but it is using the send syscall under the hood, and send syscall only works with a socket FD, and it's overkilling to set up a socket just for the communication between C star thread and an alien thread, and even FD is a much simpler solution.
I want to jump in here really quick. So
Sure.
just make sure I understand. So the first branch is on the C star repo, and it adds the alien and the reactor write many submit to.
Yeah.
It also has a bunch of Noah's commits that fix CMake build, I guess, or add CMake build.
Add CMake build. Yeah.
So has any of this been shown to the C star folks yet? Like
regarding the CMake one, yes, Noah is discussing with
Cool.
C star guys. But regarding to the write many and submit to, I need more time to add a test case or something, so it can be more ready to review.
It might be worth getting early feedback, just on the approach. I think you weren't part of the call. We had a conversation with Avi Kivity a couple months back, but he was suggesting, just taking one of the current pollers and adding a new one, essentially what you're doing here with the alien one. But it might be worth just running it by them to see if this makes sense. That's what they were imagining.
I will do.
Suggestions.
Casey also suggests that I need to post my change to their discussion group mailing list.
Yeah. Cool.
For a review.
Okay.
I will do it.
Perfect. Okay. And then on the Ceph side, the changes are, let's see, it's adding dank stuff for buffers, and it's adding C star as a submodule. Is that what's going on? The C star repo. Yeah, that's a submodule, and then there's the test case.
Yes.
Okay. Sounds great. And the test case is basically there's like a C star reactor core or whatever that's processing messages, and then you have a bunch of other P threads that are just sending. It's like a ping pong test. Is that what's going on?
Yeah.
It's actually got a full-on messenger going on here.
But the messenger is not quite ready. The interoperability is the existing messenger cannot yet to talk to the C star messenger implemented by Casey. That's the one of the action item.
What's the C star messenger that Casey did?
Oh, yeah, that's one Casey implemented.
What is it? I don't remember what that is.
Hold on, let me pick the commit messenger. Okay, I'm posting the commit in the chat. It's also in that branch. It's a little bit earlier. And because you also added a test case for this messenger, but the messenger is talking to itself, so so they are using the same protocol, and that protocol is not compatible with the one we are using now.
Yeah, so it's just opening sockets and sending.
It's a more simplified version of the socket messenger we're using.
Okay. All right. Because this is like the all right. I think what I want to do is play around with the unit test, make sure I really understand it. Before we go talk to the DBGK folks in a couple weeks. It seems to me like the path forward that I've been imagining in my head is that we have this alien piece that lets pthreads talk to C star. Once that's sort of working, then we add C star to the build and we set up a reactor, the tame reactor, whatever, in the OSD, but it does nothing initially, and then we just start like giving it a few trivial things to do, like I don't know, maybe we make a C star version of like the log thing, like dout logging instead of the thread, just to like prove it out and make sure that the communication stuff works. Once that's done, then the big chunk would be to move to make async messenger work with that. It's all its worker threads, and instead use the reactor. So there'd be like a C star messenger implementation based on async messenger.
Yes, which is not compatible with the existing messenger interfaces. So it's a one-way.
Yeah, it would be a different. Right, it would be a different. Well, it would be. I think it would be close, right? So I mean, the messenger interface would, because like, it's still send message and receive. Like send message wouldn't really need to change because that's like a non-blocking thing.
Yeah, it's different, but it's close.
Yeah, but like the receiving semantics would be totally different, right?
And we need the overhaul of all the consumer of the messenger.
Yeah, but I think this would be like it would end up with two messenger implementations or interfaces basically. So there would be the traditional pthreads one that everything uses, and then the OSD only initially would use this special messenger interface that actually delivers everything via C star.
Right, but from the OSD's perspective, it will be using only one messenger, the C star messenger.
Yeah, right, and that's the big shift. So I guess that what I don't have any idea is how much work that actually is going to be, how significant the changes, how much work it would be to actually take all the existing async messenger bits of code and sort of reglue it all back together using a reactor framework.
I believe we are using the thread pool for the blocking calls, so presumably it will be easy. But the difficult part will be messenger, the logging, and the configuration reading and the property writing path, which is still blocking call, and we assume it's not blocking. And
like all the startups, all the startup stuff, you mean?
Yeah.
The configuration. Yeah, I mean, right.
I think we can move on by implementing the ping pong test to make it more look like the OSD in one way or another.
Yeah.
to fix all the issues, and then we can move on to OSD.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I had one, maybe this is a trivial detail, but I was reading the crash course or whatever in C Star forever ago. Um, the way that it was set up, it like takes over the process startup. So like it like takes your argv and argc and like passes all the stuff into C Star. And so it kind of wanted to own like the process bootstrapping initialization phase of everything too. Is that required? Is that because it seems like that's not what we want, right? We want to be able to like go through all our normal startup stuff, like load our config, get kind of ready, and then like start up the reactor and then maybe fork or whatever beforehand, and then go. That seems like the easier way to integrate it. But I'm not sure if that makes sense. Have you looked at that part of it?
A little bit. I don't think it's a big deal.
Okay.
As you can find it in the demo, it's a.
You're just passing in
actually.
like argc and argv.
Yeah.
Run here. Yeah. Run argc argv. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
In ping pong test, I will try to abstract it into or either more simpler interface, but it's not quite finished yet.
Cool. Okay.
That's the way I think we'll be using C Star.
Cool. Okay. C Star context.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I wonder if we should attach that to CCT even. The Ceph context. It doesn't matter, I guess. But cool. Okay. Well, I'm excited. I can't wait to have. I guess I'm going to be really excited when we have, even if it's not all like perfect or whatever, if we have the C Star module in the tree with like a tame reactor that we can start playing with.
And you can make it right now, and the first test will pass. I'm sure.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
With -D with C Star extra, and be sure to update your sub module.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
I've covered all the item in my script. Actually, okay. And the other thing I need to mention is Alan's suggestion to build a RocksDB on C Star. I think it's applicable, and once the ping pong test passed, I will try his idea out. See if it's possible.
It sounded ambitious to me. But we'll see.
Yeah, that's something we want to explore, but I would not put that in sort of
I agree.
the using C Star path. Let's get it to a state where it's ready for people to use in some form, and so that we can and so that regardless of whether we end up managing to convert RocksDB, we can start doing the top level path with the messenger into the outboard queue and stuff.
Yeah, just getting as many of the other bits and pieces in there as we can.
The worst case, we will countertize it in its own thread pool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the whole thing with the C Star magic mutexes and condition variables just kind of scares me because it makes it look like the code is working one way, but in reality it's working a different way, which makes me very nervous.
It's now very hard to debug. If we do it the way it's even harder to debug.
It's bad enough doing multi-threaded programming with condition variables and mutexes like with pthreads, but then having it be like a fiction seems even weirder. But
yeah.
Well, I think once you have the debug tool set up, then it's actually probably much easier because you can just trace directly through the data structures to see what's going on.
Does it have some kind of
actually, if you're actually looking at the stack, I mean, in the state of the world.
I thought it would be ideal if the guys have some GDB script to track down the copyright or something.
Yeah.
That would be fantasy.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have.
Cool. That sounds great. That's all my questions. Do you have anything else, Craig?
Yeah, we have Mina.
Yeah, I think I'm good. Thanks so much, Kipu.
Sure.
Cool.
Hello.
Hello. How's it going?
Hi, Sage. It's going well. So actually, we didn't get enough chance to like complete the coding for this pull request for Clay code. But so the main changes we are doing is to make this Clay code as a separate plugin. Previously, it was a technique within JErasure. So we want Clay code to be able to use both JErasure and ISAL libraries depending on what's given as input. So the current code which I'm like writing, it's agnostic to like it just takes this erasure code interface reference based on what is entered in a profile. So I'll need more time. So I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm still like working in the background and it will be there like but one thing is I'm also like working on some other projects, so it might be little delayed. So the current plan is by April 15th, we want to do like proper debugging of this thing so that we give a proper version. And one more thing is that we want to understand what kind of test frameworks are expected for an erasure code. So currently we see a test folder.
Yeah, I think for the most part, there's already a bunch of stress tests in our QA suite that'll like read and write data and simulate failures and all that stuff. So I think that you won't have to do any work really to capture that. We'll just need to tweak it so that it also tests your plugin as in addition to the other ones. That part's pretty easy. There's also a corpus of data called the erasure code non-regression corpus, where it's just a bunch of encoded data to confirm that we can decode stuff that was previously written, and we don't like break something so that you can't decode old data. So there's that also. So I think there's like an actual step you have to go add a bunch of data to that, but I'm not quite sure how it works because I've never actually looked at it. I just know it's there. I think that's the basics. I guess I would kind of turn around and say, do you think there is any additional specific tests that are needed for Clay codes because of the way that they behave that aren't needed for the other codes? Or do you think that's sufficient?
Currently, I don't think there is anything new needed because this is like, it just reduces the repair bandwidth. But as such, I don't think it will cause any new test cases.
Okay. So I think probably the main thing to do is to look at the way that the erasure code tests are structured and make sure that there's like what I would expect is that there's a facet that specifies all the different erasure code profiles that are getting tested with like, different values of M and K and different backend plugins or whatever. And then it would just be a matter of adding a bunch of Clay code ones with different values, sizes for the sub chunks and the regular chunks so that we make sure we're exercising all the different code paths. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it's structured, but probably when we get to that point, it's just a matter of doing that to make sure that we get coverage. So it can certainly help sort that out.
Okay.
But I think that's going to be the easy part.
Okay then.
Yeah.
So the thing is, while we are debugging this, we don't mind taking the review comments. At least at this point, we can take review comments along with while we are debugging in the background. So previously the code was like kind of little old. Now I updated the code.
Cool. Okay. It's the same pull request.
Yeah, except for the syntax and the formatting, you can go with the algorithm. I'll fix the syntax and formatting.
Cool. Okay. And this is the same pull request
14.
that was in
Yes.
May of last year, April of last year. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. That sounds great. I'm not sure who's going to review it. I can do another pass over it, but my review is pretty superficial because I'm not an erasure code person. As far as just like general style and using the Ceph APIs and so on, I can help with that. I think probably the key thing is going to be once it's stable, we'll be running it through the stress test suite to make sure that it's holding up against all the testing.
Okay.
So as far as timing goes, the feature freeze for Mimic is like April, mid-April. So that's coming up pretty quick. So I'm guessing that this is not going to be ready. And even if it were sort of done, it would be definitely marked as experimental for Mimic because it's sort of brand new and hasn't had a lot of testing behind it. So probably the real target for this being something that users can use is going to be the next release after that, which is going to be around, I guess, next January when Nautilus is frozen.
Yeah, that sounds okay.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay. But I think that the sooner we can get this like in a stable form and into the tree and actually getting tested, the more time and confidence we'll get as far as the testing.
Yeah.
Is this more than just a plugin right now?
It's just a plugin.
I ask because that seems like something that we actually could backport in a later point release.
Yeah, we totally could backport it. Yeah.
But we will need one thing is we will need this vector code support.
That already merged, right? That was the bit that you did before that changed the erasure code plugin API.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's already in the tree. That's in there. I think. I think we merged that a while ago. So yeah, I think this should be pretty. Yeah, this definitely could be backported if we want to do that. It's very self-contained. So, okay.
Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. I'm super excited about this. It's, yep. I'm very happy to see innovative new erasure codes done on Ceph. Also, I think it's awesome.
Right. And
That's good to know.
You weren't at fast, but someone asked after the talk about is it already in? They wanted to use it, right? So.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not able to do it any sooner because I'm like a student, so there's so much work going on.
Understood. Yep. Know how that goes, definitely. But yeah, we're super excited about it. So thank you. Can't wait to see this land.
You.
Yep. Cool. Okay.
Well, I think that's it for this meeting.
All right.
Does anyone have any question, comments? I don't think so. So,
all right.
Thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys in April. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Later on.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kafu.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man.